Welcome to the SalesFirst
Sales Smackdown.
All right, guys. Adam Morris here with SalesFirst Recruiting. We recruit sales and marketing professionals in Portland, Phoenix, and Denver, and I am here with Dan Morris and Patrick Ortman. So normally on these Sales Smackdowns, we spend some time with different sales leaders in Portland, but this time we have a little bit of a special Sales Smackdown. We have 3 leaders running 3 offices, and Patrick Ortman of Arizona thought it would be fun to interview Dan and I for this one. So, Patrick, I understand you have some questions. Please feel free to begin.
Well, let's first start off by dispensing with the obvious elephant in the room. I don't think that it's a coincidence that you both have the same last name. You guys are brothers. So that is, it's not the first time that I've seen family trying to work together in the same business, and frankly, it doesn't always go well. So tell me just a little bit about how you guys moved past the conventional wisdom of not doing business with family and how you've managed to make it work.
Ooh.
Adam, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah. Back in 2012, we kind of caught lightning in a bottle when we started what was then West Coast Careers in Portland, and we needed help really fast. We ended up onboarding a couple of clients that asked a lot of us, and I really only had 2 requirements. I needed somebody who was really smart, and I needed somebody that I trusted. That's how we ended up hiring Dan about 6 years ago, and it was definitely a rough ride for the first few years. Dan obviously now is my partner in Denver, and because he's now an expert in the field, it's a really different relationship, but things were tough, and I don't know how great of a boss I was to my younger brother, and I'm not sure that Dan totally respected the employer-employee relationship, and so there were lots of times where I would totally yell at him and where I wouldn't yell at others.
But so you're not sure I totally respected that relationship, but I am positive that I did, in fact, not give it the right amount of respect.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm surprised you guys were able to tough it out, as it were, especially without any family counseling. But maybe I can afford you that forum now. Confession time, gentlemen.
Okay.
And I'm gonna put this on Dan because I know it's usually the little brother who takes the brunt of the bigger brother's fury growing up. Dan, what's the one thing growing up that you were maybe blamed for, or that Adam laid at your feet, that your parents to this day still believe that you're the one?
What do you mean by that?
I'll tell you what he means.
Go ahead, Adam.
When I antagonized you and you fought back, you were the one to get in trouble.
Right.
Oh,
because I was the good kid.
Or maybe it was that broken vase in the living room that nobody really knew who broke it, but maybe Adam was kind enough because he was a little bit older to share that it was probably Dan.
No. Adam was the good kid. I was the troublemaker. And Adam, you knew how to push my buttons just enough to get me to overreact.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time our parents were finally around to witness the mayhem, it really looked like I was just being a big pain in the butt.
Yeah, Dan got grounded quite a bit, and I pretty much just skated through. I will say, however, that I have firstborn syndrome, which is that I had all sorts of rules that I had to follow, and my parents had basically given up by the time that Dan and my sister, Dan's twin sister Sandra, were around. They just let them do whatever they wanted. So they kind of had lower expectations of those two.
So tell me this, guys. There's probably people who are listening right now who are in a similar situation, working with a close relationship or strong friendship. And I'd love to understand maybe 1 or 2 bright line rules that you guys have put into place on how you're going to play nicely with each other and not spoil the relationship.
Early on in our working relationship, when there was a lot of fighting and bickering and stuff, we made a commitment to really settle our differences as quickly as possible and move on. And that's usually how a lot of our conflicts ended up. They would come on fast and they would end just as quickly, and then it was business as usual after that.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Dan and I talk a few times a week in the morning, and I'll call his cell, and we'll just shoot the breeze like while I'm driving to work. And if we call each other in the middle of the day, like our calls might last 10 seconds. I'm like, hey, what's the name of that customer that blankety blank, and that works for us. And then we try really hard, because we see each other on like Thanksgiving, and we pretty much don't bring up business just because it's way more fun to be brothers and friends outside of work than it is to be coworkers.
Solid words, gentlemen, solid words. Let's talk just a little bit about the current environment for recruiting of millennials. One of the things that I hear quite a bit is it's tough to engage with millennials, and it's almost as hard, if not harder, to retain a good one once you've found them. Where do you guys kind of see the challenges, and what would be a key word of advice for attracting and retaining these new wave of candidates?
Sure. All of our offices are centered in markets that are really attracting a lot more millennials than maybe other parts of the country. And so we come across this kind of thing day in and day out. And, we can all come up with some complaints we have about work ethic and some other things that may or may not be true. But what I've found is that most of them are educated, creative, and very intelligent. And a lot of them have ideas about where they want their career to go and what they want for themselves. And it's not always about money, and it's not always about, freedom of schedule. And a lot of times it's about being able to make a difference and be utilized properly.
That's excellent advice, Dan. Thanks for sharing. I'd like to pry just a little bit into you guys' personalities as leaders, as recruiters, and better understand what makes you tick. And I think that a useful question is there one consumer product that you're so excited about or maybe use personally that you would like to be a spokesperson for?
Well, once we sell this company for billions of dollars, I would like to open up www.www.com. And it would be wine, whiskey, and watches, which are the three things that I like. Outside, of course, of, family, shelter, food, all those sorts of things. But in terms of, other consumer products, no, only because, consumption is just kind of getting old for me.
I've got good news for you. I actually just did a quick search for www.www.com. I recommend going out and grabbing that URL up right now because I think after this podcast, it's going to be a hot commodity.
True. I just basically skyrocketed the price of it too.
Exactly. Hey, Dan, maybe I'll pass this one over to you.
Sure.
I'm sure that you've had quite a few different conversations with people about changing careers, and this can be like a very emotional conversation sometimes. You're essentially telling them that whatever degree of security and certainty they've been able to build up for themselves, go ahead and just move on to something else. How do you have that conversation with people?
It's tough for people to envision themselves performing well at something that they've never done before. A lot of times, I really try to reassure people that the skills they have and the expertise they have is very, very valuable in the industry that I'm trying to persuade them to get involved in. And actually, I just spoke with an old candidate that I worked with a few years ago that's a perfect example of this. Several years ago, I was asked to help find financial analysts that had the grit to become good salespeople. We did find a few, and I caught up with one of them, and he was sharing with me how that decision to move into sales was the best one he had ever made, and that the year before he had cleared over $500,000 in earnings.
Right on. That's a very good share.
Yeah.
Adam, a lot of the people who are listening here will be prospective candidates, people who are thinking about making a career change, but the concept or the idea of going in and interviewing, especially if it's been a while or if they haven't had a lot of experience as an interviewee, is how am I going to do in this thing? What do I need to do in order to prepare? If you were to give that person just one word of advice that you feel would move the needle the furthest in terms of their success during an interview, what would the one thing be that you would share with our listeners here today?
To be themselves and to interview with as much authenticity as they can. And I've started to give that advice more and more as we've matured as a company. And the reason for that is because if you interview in a really sincere, genuine way, where you openly share your strengths and your weaknesses and let people know where you think you would be successful and where you would need more help, then the chance of you landing at the right spot would really increase. Whereas if you interview in the traditional sense, where I think a lot of candidates want to appear to be the best at everything, you could ultimately get the offer from the wrong company in the wrong role. And so the more that candidates accept that advice that they should interview for themselves only, I think the more success they're going to have in their career.
Boy, I love that authenticity statement. And won't it do them a ton of favors when they go into an interview and they're just themselves? Because, frankly, at the end of the day, that's what people want to interview, is the person sitting in front of them. And nobody knows the answers to your personal questions as much as you do. So that's a really good piece of advice. Dan, back to you, sir. For any job seeker who's out there who's consciously made the decision to move forward, and maybe they've done very well in the interview process, and they're anticipating an offer, now comes the reality of, oh my gosh, this is real. How do I sever what could be a very long-term, very healthy relationship with their current employer? That can be a real stumbling block for some folks on moving forward in the process. How would you encourage candidates to move through that hurdle?
When you're deciding to transition positions, the battle is against doing nothing and staying in your comfort zone. Whenever you transition to a new organization, you're essentially leaving your comfort zone temporarily. And, a lot of good employees have really good instincts, and they've usually made it pretty far by following their initial instincts. And if they've worked hard enough to earn an offer from another organization, usually their instincts took them there in the first place. And so when people get to a certain point where they have to make a tough decision, I really encourage them to go with their gut, follow the instincts that took them there in the first place, and have ultimately contributed to their success thus far.
Quit that job. Right on. Well, gentlemen, to wrap this up with a neat little bow, tell us just a little bit about SalesFirst Recruiting and how somebody might engage you guys, us guys.
At SalesFirst, we recruit sales and marketing professionals in Phoenix, Denver, and Portland. And the way to get a hold of us is to go to our website at www.salesfirstrecruiting.com. And you can send in your resume, connect with the recruiter. You can send us a letter via Pony Express. We will work with you no matter how you want to get a hold of us.
Right on. Gentlemen, so good to speak with the Morris brothers here today. Any last words?
Adam, I think I'm going to make it in for Thanksgiving this next time around. So
Fantastic.
Good.
Me too.
Thanks, guys.